If the meeting of the Public Safety and Homeland Security will please come to order. As normal, we'll start our meeting with prayer, and I've asked Representative Kevin Cook.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this day, God. We thank you for the many blessings of life. Thank you for this ability to come together, Lord, and work on behalf of the citizens of Georgia, God. We pray for wisdom this morning and discernment, Lord, to know that we're doing everything that we should be doing, God. Lead, guide, and direct in all that we do this morning. It's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen.
I want to also caution those in the audience and committee members, be sure that your cell phones are turned off. At our last meeting, we had some cell phones that were going off, so I just want to caution everyone. Also want to remind you this morning, as we hear House Bill 247, that we will again, as always, follow the rules that have been adopted by this committee, which gives anyone that wants to testify the 3 minutes in regards to any comments that may be made in regards to a bill or of interest to our committee members. With that, I'll call on the author of House Bill 247, Representative J. Neal. You're fine there if you'd like.
If it's okay, then I'll stay here. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to bring House Bill 247 today, and want to give just a little bit of background on where we are. 247 is a bill that I introduced last year, and while we passed it out of committee, we ended up using a vehicle and getting this through the legislature without using House Bill 247. And the effort behind 247 was to bring about required criminal background checks for EMTs. We've been working with the department and trying to do that for several years, and we were able to get that done last year, so that that our EMTs across the state would we would have the assurance that they had undergone federal criminal background checks, and good piece of legislation that a lot of people worked together on to get passed last year. One of the unintended consequences of this, and we worked with the firefighters last year to try to get the legislation where it needed to be, but we still ended up with an unintended consequence of that legislation, and it came to my attention when I got an email from my local fire chief. And I meant to bring that with me today to read it, but I can summarize it for you. It in essence said that as a result of the new law requiring the EMTs to have criminal background checks, that when their firefighters who have already went through the Georgia Firefighter Standards and Training Council and already had submitted to criminal background checks and had already done what was required for them to be firefighters, when they apply to become an EMT, they were having to get another criminal background check, and rather than being able to get that at the local sheriff's department, they were going to the title pawn shop in Ringgold and having those criminal background checks done at this pawn shop in Ringgold, and paying around $60 a piece to get those done. That's not what we intended with the bill last year. We've worked with the department to try to figure out how we can license our firefighters and our EMTs without having to have double background checks. There are some federal regulations and issues that we deal with. Federal regulations require that if statute requires a background check for firefighters and for EMTs, that they can't take one background check and submit it twice. It has to be submitted separately to those two entities if it's required by statute. So what we're doing is we're resurrecting 247 and coming with a substitute that I think will fix that problem. And we've worked with the department, and I appreciate their efforts to do this. They don't agree entirely, and they're going to let you know where they don't agree in a little bit, and I understand that, certainly. But we've worked with them to simply carve out an exception that if a firefighter, and it begins in line 36 obviously, if a firefighter is certified by the Georgia Firefighter Standards and Training Council, employed with a local fire department, and have as a condition of certification or employment obtained a criminal history records check from the center and the Federal Bureau of Investigation within the last 10 years, they shall not be required to obtain additional criminal history records check in order to be licensed as emergency medical services personnel. The department, however, may require that as a result of the application process, the chief of the employing local fire department submit a letter or other document verifying that the applicant is employed with the local fire department, has attained a criminal history records check from the Center and the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and according to criminal histories has not been arrested for or convicted of a felony offense. And by carving that exemption out, we are saying that these individuals, this group of individuals, are not required to have the criminal background check, and therefore we're being able to get around that federal regulation that would otherwise require them to have two separate checks. It is, to the extent, the way I understand it, Madam Chair, the way it is, if a fire department is hiring a new employee that is both a firefighter and an EMS, that upon hiring that they will have to initially do two criminal background checks upon hiring so that they can submit that to both departments. This takes care of that, and I know there'll be some testimony and certainly understand that, but Madam Chair, that is the purpose of this bill, and I appreciate the opportunity to bring it today.
This time we'll take questions from our committee and Representative Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Neal, I know we went through this a lot. I have just two quick questions. One, from the center, what center are we talking about on line 38? Because we just got through talking about a pawn shop. So,
I believe that's the GCIC.
Is that what? Okay. It's elsewhere and code taking the center. Okay. Thank you.
And let me tell you the reason for the pawn shop is there are contract vendors that provide those criminal background checks, and the local the two closest to our area are both pawn shops.
Interesting. All right. Next one's on line 47. And again, refresh my memory here. According to criminal histories, has not been arrested for or convicted of a felony offense. The convictions, I understand. The arresting part, especially if that shows up from a law enforcement, they can pull up and they can see arrest. Is there something there that because an adjudicated arrest that is cleared or null-prossed or even if it went to trial and was found not guilty, was there a reason for the double arrest or conviction there?
Let me ask: is this consistent with present standards that it's arrested or convicted?
I may be mistaken, but it was my understanding that the GCIC report does provide for arrest information, not just conviction information.
I agree completely. I'm just curious, we put it in here in a section where the fire department submits a letter or other document verifying that the applicant is employed at the local fire department, has obtained a criminal records check. I'm just not sure what the number 3 is for. Because once you get the record check, that's included in number 2.
My understanding was they cannot provide a copy of it. Therefore, they were going to provide the information that they were not, in fact, convicted or arrested for a felony offense. Again, it's primarily for a liability perspective. If there is arrest for a felony offense, a licensing agency can take action regardless of the fact that there wasn't a conviction. So that's why there's a focus on arrest information. A licensing agency looks at actual conduct as opposed to mere conviction records. Does that answer your question? I guess
no.
The fact that they're hired implies that they have not been convicted or arrested for a felony offense. Perhaps that's what you're suggesting.
Okay, maybe
Representative Collins, would you prefer that to just say has not been convicted instead of arrested?
Well, I guess I'm just curious in the sense of, maybe a testimony will come to this. And it's early in the morning, my mind is still fuzzy, but just being arrested does not stop you from becoming a firefighter. Unless please somebody yell real quickly. That's why, so in the certification process has, and I understand the background. Conviction, yes. I guess what I'm just trying to figure out is the department's going to go through the proper procedures. Line 3 seems to be, if anything, you could have stopped at line 2 and none of this question would ever come up because it's basically saying we've done the background check. So I was just curious as to why 3, or who, was it an addition that maybe I just didn't know about? Otherwise, I'm not sure why line 3 is there.
Well, certainly we can strike it. The implication is the fact that they hired them, is that there is not a problem there. Again, that was to provide reassurance to the department that there wasn't something that they needed to look at further. An arrest, while the arrest itself cannot prevent decertification or basis for denying the license, it's my understanding that the underlying conduct still could. For instance, if an individual was arrested for child molestation, the prosecutor decided there was not sufficient evidence for a criminal conviction, you could still decertify that individual or refuse the certification based on a hearing, an administrative hearing that discussed the underlying issues and established it at a lower evidentiary standard, if that makes sense. While the prosecutor may not have enough evidence to prosecute for a conviction, a licensing agency does not have to establish events by clear and convincing evidence or beyond a reasonable doubt. The standard is much lower, and they can decertify based on the actions of the individual.
Okay, and I agree with you on many boards and licensing of this game, and if this happened during, again, I'm not sure where in firefighter certification the appeal, especially if the department has hired them, because this is where we're looking at here. A department has hired this individual, so they would know about this, and I'm not sure that the firefighter standards and council, this would be an issue that they would look at to keep them from being certified. That was my only question. I know in other agencies it does make a difference if they're caught in the act. That's a whole different story. So again, I'm not trying to hold up. I apologize for the question, but it's just
No, I think it's a good question, and the department probably will be able to address that a little bit more. But one of the things that we're carving out an exemption and telling the department we want you to license these individuals as EMTs without doing a criminal background check because of the assurance that you have from these things that the fire department has. So we're not talking about that firefighter certification. We're talking about an assurance to the department that this applicant for EMT has been their application, their records have been scrutinized by the fire department, and this is a qualified person for EMT. And I think the department probably wants some assurance that if we're going to do this without doing an additional background check, we want to make sure that we're looking at individuals that we don't have concerns about. Right. I think if there was an arrest, the department could still look at that individual and maybe take some additional steps through an appeal process to get them. But I think this is the effort to give that kind of assurance to the department, and I'm sure they can address it a little bit further.
If I do, Madam Chair, and I think what we have, and I think we're on the same page. I'm not against this. Don't get me wrong.
No, I know you're not, and I understand your line of question, and some of the things you're thinking about is the reason that I have House Bill 663 out there.
Exactly.
Too.
Well, and again, when we're talking departments, we're talking training council. Is that what we're? When you say department, you're talking.
When I'm saying department now, I'm talking about the Department of Public Health, who does the certification for EMTs.
That's good. And so again, I guess what I'm not to beat this any further, but I think when we get past line 2, I was just curious, and that was the basis of my question, was if the certifying department, which has employed this person and has submitted their paperwork for EMT, has done the criminal background check, I was just not sure why 3 was needed to be put into our code. I guess that's because you're actually putting this into our code. And so I was just saying 2 seems to have, and learned, our legal counsel who is well versed in this is actually, once they do the criminal history background check, they're saying I've looked at everything because that arrest is on there and everything else. So if there's a need that they need to, I would just, this extra step of 3, I just did not understand and was trying to get a clarification on, and may have a motion at a certain time on that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Representative Taylor. Representative Taylor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a couple of questions. On line 39, a 10-year period. That seems like a long time, and that was a concern to me. You could have someone that had gone to Las Vegas for vacation, gotten into trouble, and nobody at home knew about it. And again, I had a problem with the same thing, line number 3. You're asking a chief to attest to something for somebody that has been working with them for 10 years. Are they going to be required to go back and run and incur expenses to do an additional background check? How are they going to know the current, most recent 9 years?
It's a great question. We're talking about initial certification. EMTs and firefighters do not have to have updated criminal background checks. So if an EMT is certified 20 years ago, of course that let's go forward 20 years. If an EMT is certified today, 20 years down the road, if they're still a certified EMT, we don't know for sure what's happened during that 20 years.
Right.
And the same with a firefighter. I would say this: as an employer, if I have an employee that goes to Las Vegas and is arrested and convicted of a felon, I think I'm going to notice that they've not been at work during that period of time, and probably have a good indication that there's a situation. So, if I understand your concern, and that would be a very similar concern to the fact that we only do a background check once, and then we deem them good for the rest of their career based on that one background check. So I think there's a very similar line of thinking between those two.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any additional questions from our committee members? Seeing none, now we will go to those that would like to testify for or against the bill and hear from them. Remember the 3-minute time period, and if you will just gather in a line here, if you're in school, and start your comments. Anyone? That's the school teacher.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee. I appreciate the time to get up and speak. I'd also like to thank Representative Jay Neal for doing this effort last year after many years of the association and the department looking at doing background checks for EMTs, and we applaud his efforts in that effort. What I want to say is we want to be as helpful as possible. We're a new department. We're going in a new direction. The commissioner is a new commissioner. We want to make this as easy as possible with the confines that we have. Given that, we want to say that we will ultimately do whatever the legislature and the governor want us to do. I want to say that. Okay. We are okay with an exclusion for firefighters in this effort. We understand the need for having two, or the need to not have two background checks at one time. We would like to see, or the commissioner would like to see that exclusion time period a little shorter, and I think some others will testify to that as well. But for us, it's we're just trying to be as helpful to our provider friends as possible.
Thank you. Any other comments?
No, and I have Mr. Ken Bramlett is our Inspector General, and I have Mr. Keith Wages, who's our EMS Director, with me if you have any questions about the actual process or the technicalities of all this.
Either of you want to speak?
Good morning. I'm Ken Bramlett. I'd just like to explain maybe one of the reasons that they were looking at the arrest situation is when you get a criminal history back, a lot of times you'll have arrests on there that have no disposition, and then you have to go find out what the disposition was. In other words, if you have an applicant that was arrested for burglary in 2003 and there's no disposition, you have to go back and find out what the disposition of that burglary was. Were they found guilty? Did they plead guilty? First offender? What was the status of that particular arrest? Whereas if you say just convictions, then you could miss if you're not going back and checking, not saying the fire department didn't do that, but we would like to be assured that they have checked on all arrests and make sure that they've been appropriately adjudicated.
I see a couple of folks that would like to ask questions on the committee, but if you'll hold your questions and we'll address those. All right, continue with our testimony.
Hi, I'm Josh Mackey with the Georgia Association of EMS. We helped bring this bill last year with Chairman Neal. I just want to express my thanks to him and to the committee for considering it and passing it last year and helping get the National Background Check instituted. Currently, with the new language, our association is not supportive of the 10-year time frame that's included in there. We feel it grants a virtual exception to an entire category of medics, and as representing all medics from fire, county, hospital, private, everything, We don't feel and we can't support that big of a time limit. If you considered a shorter time limit, I think you could, help solve some of the disparity that people might feel between the different categories of medics, and you'd also address the biggest issue that we have that the fire services are facing, and that's new hires. With new hires, most fire services now are requiring them to be a firefighter and an EMT or paramedic. And if you consider a shorter time frame, while I can't specifically endorse it, our board has to, discuss that further. But in a time frame like Mr. Crutchfield discussed, I think you would, pretty much take care of those major situations with new hires. So,
Any additional comments?
I'll leave it at that unless anybody has any questions.
Well, this is just testimony time, but
Sure.
thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Jackie Gibbs, Fire Chief in the City of Marietta, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the committee very much in support of this bill. There is a goal here, and the goal is to make sure that we have quality public safety folks, whether they're fire, law enforcement officers, or EMS personnel delivering services to our citizens. So from that standpoint, the fire service and law enforcement have been doing these background checks forever, as long as I've been on the fire department 35 years, and it goes all the way back, law enforcement. And so the department is new to this part of the situation. This is costing your local taxpayers additional funds, and we're already meeting that goal. So, and that's our request, is that we don't need to duplicate the situation one on top of the other with multiple background checks just because there are multiple state agencies involved. We really need to solve this total problem. As far as the 10 years goes, in my viewpoint, it really doesn't matter if it's 10 years, 20 years, or 100 years, because you're going forward and you're talking about behavior. You're talking about an initial background investigation on an EMT, a potential EMT, or an initial background investigation on a police officer, or an initial background investigation on a firefighter. So the future is the future. So there's no requirement that an EMT come back and be retested. So why should a firefighter go back and be retested? What is the assumption that will have happened during that person's employment on a firefighter that you don't assume about an EMT? So you're not granting a special exemption for a particular class of folks. This is costing your local government's money, and it's costing local government's money because the agency will not accept background investigations by the Sheriff's Department. If I go to Marietta Police Department and run the background on a firefighter, it costs me $25 to pay the FBI. If I go to the private vendor that's involved here, I have to pay them $57 for the exact same thing because they won't accept the one that comes from Marietta Police Department. So this is bureaucracy getting in the way of itself. It truly is. But I understand the goal, and I appreciate the goal. But there can be a triple threat here. If you go down to Bainbridge, where a police officer, maybe a firefighter, may also be an EMT, now you've got 3 background investigations to run on the same person. The background investigation world is moving fast. Technology is moving fast. It's just the record keeping that can't keep up. If you come to Marietta and our police officers don't know who you are, we can walk you over to a Marietta police car, stick your hand in the police car, and we're going to run your fingerprints instantly right out of the police car. So the technology, and it's just us in the record-keeping world that haven't caught up. So I'd appreciate the opportunity, appreciate you letting me talk, and I appreciate if you would move the bill forward so that we cannot cost our local taxpayers money on top of money as these folks come online. Not all fire departments require them to immediately be EMTs. So some of us do, but thank you for your time, and I'll answer any questions at the appropriate time, Madam Chair.
Good,
Thank you.
Any other testimony? All right, seeing none, Representative Collins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have basically 3 questions for all the participants. First one to the director. Ken, when you spoke just a minute ago, I had a question that said that you had the issue that we need to know the arrest record. Well, if the chief, and the whole purpose of this bill is set forward is that the chief provides a letter stating that they have done the background check, that they are looking at which contains arrest and convictions when they get that report. Are you in essence basically just against them being able to send you a letter? Is that what you're against?
Come back to the mic and identify yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Ken Bramlett, Department of Public Health. No, sir, we're not in any way objecting to them providing us a letter or affidavit
Okay.
that they have run the background check. And I have great respect for our brothers in the fire department and the police department, and I would like to assume that they have done a diligent check on all arrests that are not adjudicated on the background check. However, we need an assurance, not just an assumption, that that's been done.
Okay.
All right,
But
second question.
yeah, and that's second question on that one is that they would be in trouble if they didn't. To Josh, second.
Josh.
Do you have a recommended time frame?
Identify yourself.
'Cause you
Josh
talked-
Mackey with Georgia EMS. You know, with the way these things work, I've got to go back to our board of our association to get a recommended time frame. But what I can tell you right now is the one that Mr. Crutchfield laid out of the 12 months is, you know, if I had to tell you one to consider, that might be one. I would just suggest maybe look at something shorter in general.
Okay, thank you. And
Thank
Chief,
you. Third.
why are they not?
Identify again and then.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Jackie Gibbs, Fire Chief Marietta. Yes, sir.
Why were we not accepting a criminal background check done by the police department?
It's in the rules of the agency.
We need another bill. Yeah, somebody, please address that, because that makes absolutely no sense.
Ken Bramlett, Department of Public Health.
If he, because he
If
said
you
it was
can,
his answer. so
if you
Ken
can give
can't
us an answer as to the direction here, please identify yourself.
Yes, ma'am. Ken Bramlett, Department of Public Health. Public Law 92-54 provides the authority to run background checks if they are required by state statute. And state statute, the OCGA 25-4-8 gives authority to run the background checks on firefighters. It's a different code section, different state law. It's 31-11-51 for EMS. And Public Law 92-54 prohibits disseminating it past the purpose for which it was run. In other words, if it was run for the purpose of a firefighter, it cannot be disseminated anywhere else for any other purpose. If somebody goes to work for Marietta Fire Department and they leave and go to Fulton County Fire Department, that can be disseminated because it's for the same purpose. If they leave there and want to be a police officer, it cannot be used for that purpose.
Thank you so much. That is another thing for another day. Thank you.
Any additional
Wow.
questions?
No, I'm done.
All right, back to our committee. In looking at the substitute that is being offered for House Bill 247, I will ask the author to give his final remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly appreciate, and as I said in my opening remarks, the department has been very good to work with. We spent some time talking about what we need to do, and it looked like as we began our initial conversations that we were going to have a very difficult time addressing this, and as we looked more and more at those federal requirements and the regulations, we determined that the route to go was this exemption, and I commend the department for their work on this, the firefighters for bringing this to our attention, and obviously we don't want to create additional burdens, and this is a good way for us to undo an unintended consequence of a good bill, and I appreciate the committee's consideration.
With that, what is the direction from our committee in regards to the substitute LC 352613S to House Bill 247? Representative Collins,
Have a motion, Madam Chair.
please.
Motion to strike line 47 and 48 and renumber accordingly.
All right, I have a motion to strike lines 47 and 48 of LC 352613S. I have any discussion in regards to that?
Yes, Madam
addition to
Chair.
what we've had?
I would like to address the motion. The motion, I believe, is just. I believe, just personally, I think after her testimony and even hearing, I think the line 2, in which they're certifying that they have done a criminal background check, they have this. I think line 3 is just a redundancy.
All right, Representative Taylor.
Additionally, I would like to go to line 39.
Let us address this motion, and then I'll come back to you, and you can make yours. All right, we have a motion on the floor. Any further discussion?
Is that scribbling?
All right, the motion is that we strike lines 47 and 48 of LC 352613S. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the ayes carry it, and lines 47, 48 will be struck from LC 352613S.
Madam Chair,
Representative Collins.
just one quick thing. On a Scrivener's note, the "and" would need to be moved from 46 up to 44.
All right. Do we need another motion, or can we just go ahead and do that? We'll take care
I
of the
apologize,
grammar of it.
Terry, I didn't make that part.
Okay, we'll take care of the grammar
Thank you.
and correct that. All right, now do I have any further comments on House Bill 247? Representative Taylor.
Yes, I would like to look at line 39 and change the 10 years to 3.
All right, the motion is on line 39 for LC 352613S that rather than 10 years, that we strike the 10 years and place 3. Do I have a second to the motion? Do I have a second to the motion? Seeing no second, the motion fails for lack of a second. Representative Horn.
I couldn't ask the question until there was a second, but I was going to say by 3.
What?
Representative Taylor, give us your concerns.
Because I didn't want to go to only 1 year. I felt like that was too often, and I think it would be recent and you would know about it, but I just feel like 10 years is too long of a period of time. That's where the 3 came from, 36 months.
Representative Horn, comment? Okay, the motion failed for a lack of a second. Now we're back to the amended substitute to House Bill 247. We've added amendment by striking 4748. We're back to the substitute. Do I have a motion upon it? Representative Talton.
Okay, I go with the 5 years, like to strike that and just go with instead
All right,
of 10.
another amendment is being offered that on line 39 that we go to a 5-year rather than a 10-year. The motion has been made. Do I have a second? I have a second. Any comments from our committee members? Representative Horn.
Just a question. Did we have a recommendation from the firefighters on exactly what this should be? Did we? I
We
missed the
had
first part.
several recommendations as to what they would like for it to be, kind of information. 12 months was one of those recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion on this amendment offered? All right, calling for a vote. An amendment would be to the substitute to House Bill 245, line 39, that we strike the word 10, and now we put in, what was it, 5 years. 5 years. On the motion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Aye. All right, the ayes carry. We had one opposed. Is that correct? Okay, one opposed. So the motion carries. Now we're back again to the substitute to House Bill 247 as amended. Do I have a motion? All right, a motion has been made as amended to move the bill forward. Do I have a second? Second. Have a second. Any discussion in regards to the bill as amended? Seeing none, all those in favor of passing House Bill 247 as a committee sub, all signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed likewise. The ayes carry. The bill will pass as a committee sub and move forward to the rules. Is there any other business of this committee? Seeing none, committee stands adjourned.